There are a lot of great fried foods out there. French fries, nuggets, fried dough, beignets, fried ice cream. They're all so delicious. But what about beef? Has anybody ever fried beef? The only thing that comes to mind when I think of fried beef is chicken fried steak. And to be honest, I'm a chef and I still don't know what the hell that is. But today we're gonna do something crazy. We're gonna fry a $300 piece of Wagyu beef. This is a piece of Japanese Wagyu beef, or more specifically, a Miyazaki Gyu ribeye. Yep, this is the steak I always use that's won the Wagyu Olympics several times. And as always, it's from the Wagyu shop. So go check out that special code if you're interested in getting some. Again, I'm never ever paid to say that sort of thing. I genuinely just love this place. You can see the perfect marbling on this. And I'm holding it in the packaging right now so that it doesn't start melting right in my hand. But let's open it up. Especially when gearing up for something like this, I have to be honest. I always feel pretty guilty taking a piece of meat like this and doing something like frying it. But I think doing all these crazy experiments with something like this is what will hopefully lead to some incredible discoveries. I'm not exactly sure whether or not I should be seasoning this meat before putting it in the deep fryer, and I know that I'll probably sprinkle some flaky salt across after I deep fry it. But I think it might be smart here just to inject as much flavor as possible to first sprinkle my steak with just a little bit of salt. I won't go crazy with the seasoning like I usually do, but I'll flip this over and then add just another light coating of salt on the other side. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this ribeye is ready to cook. But the question is, what temperature do I do? For now, I think I'll set my fryer to 385. My biggest worry is actually overcooking this, but I still want to be able to get that bubbly, delicious golden brown crust on the edge. So I've picked a slightly thicker cut of Wagyu than what I've been typically using in some of these videos. My hope is that this added thickness will help to make sure this doesn't overcook while still allowing me to get that crust on the other side. That's the same reason I like chicken drums better than chicken flats. Now let's fry. Now that my oil is set at 385 Fahrenheit, I'll place my fryer basket into the oil and gently drop in my Wagyu. I'll let this fry for just a minute or two until I see that golden brown crust. Once we've let a minute or two go by, I'll pull this off and bring out my meat. Just look at all the bubbles and all that crust on there. It is insane. And interestingly enough, I think this might be the most evenly cooked piece of meat on the outside that I've ever had. But I'm more curious how it tastes, so let's cut it open. I'll put my piece of Wagyu on a rack and just let this rest for a second. Already, by putting this in a deep fryer, this meat has been through a lot, and I want to let it retain all those juices before cutting into it. But I will say that this looks like it has a fantastic crust, particularly the edges right here, which look amazing and perfectly cooked. Once this has been well rested, I'll slide it off my tray and onto our cutting board. I'll get nice clean cuts all the way through my beef. I really like cutting Wagyu into these perfectly thin strips. And we can't forget that we didn't really season it all that much for the first go around, which means I'll want to add a little bit more salt and any other seasonings if necessary right now. I like to tilt all the pieces up to really season the inside of the meat. Not only have we perfectly cooked this steak, but like I said, the cook on either side coming in from the top and bottom is completely even all around. And that's what frying will do. Now, I'm gonna add just a little bit of black pyramid flaky salt to the inside of my meat, which will not only look really cool, but also give us that last bit of flavor that we're missing. And now we're ready to try it. I will say I am very excited to try this beef. It is perfectly cooked, and I know I've said that 10 times already, but I'm a little bit shocked that more people don't try to fry their steaks, especially if they're worried about getting that perfect crust all around. If you could put a thermometer in your steak and fry it every time, it seems like a great way to lock in that moisture as well. I know we don't like to squeeze our meat, that sounded a little weird, but just look at this. But now I think we're ready. Enough talk, let's try this. Here we go. Me. I genuinely, truly think that is some of the juiciest steak I have ever had. And I actually feel bad even calling this steak because it deserves so much more than that. It deserves such a better term than that. Because I want to be a fair judge all the time, especially when tasting my own food, I will say one thing. I definitely don't get that same thick crust, that slight crunch on the edge of my meat that I get when I sear it in a carbon steel or cast iron pan. And frankly, that's something that I really love with meat. But at the same time, the sheer amount of juice coming out of each piece here kind of makes me want to lean more towards this. Again, this is some of the seriously juiciest meat I've ever had. Even just from barely touching it a little bit, my hands are absolutely soaked. But there's one last thing. I certainly can taste a little bit more oil than I typically want. And it hasn't gone inside the meat because we had a high enough temperature with that oil that it didn't really have time to permeate into the meat itself. It really just crisped the outside. But again, two little things to consider if you're ever thinking of cast iron versus deep frying. With that said, I think this experiment was a huge success. And honestly, I'm actually gonna rank deep frying pretty high up on the list down the road when I think about the best ways to cook steak. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, please make sure to subscribe. We get some pretty crazy Wagyu videos coming up soon. See ya.